Powered by Riverside.
Welcome back to the Movement for Life podcast. My name is Kolby Krystofik. I am your host. If you have not heard already, Coach JR, who is typically my co-host, is making some really big life changes. So you may see him in and out some of these podcasts in the next couple of weeks, but we're really excited for him. It's going to be a really, really awesome next step for him. The Movement for Life podcast, where we talk about ways to keep us moving throughout our life. What do we start out with every single week? We talk about the ways that we moved in this past week. So what did I do in this past week? I actually, everybody knows that I've been doing a lot of surfing or a lot of lifeguarding lately, a lot of beach workouts. In this past week, there was actually really good surf, really good swell. So in lieu of most of my workouts this past week, I surfed. Had a really, really great time surfing. I think I did one CrossFit workout last week, and the rest of my days were surfing. A ton of fun surfing. If you know anything about surfing, there are periods of time where there are waves, and the waves are very fun, and there are periods of time that there are no waves. So it's really difficult to surf or not as fun to surf. So that has been my last several days, has been surfing and having fun in the water, in the waves. The water is also insanely warm right now. It feels amazing to get in and enjoy the warm water, the sun, and the waves. Great. I always want to hear from you guys as well. I'm sure that you guys are doing incredible things to move each week. I would love to hear down in the comments, what are some things that you guys do every single week? Or what it may be something that's cool that you've done in the last week to move, because staying moving is how we're staying healthy. All right, today's episode is going to be kind of something fun. We are going to talk about why injuries happen, and we're actually going to pull some information from our online coaches development program. So I'm going to share some stuff with you guys right now. Let me figure out how I can share my screen. Boom, right here. Share slideshow. Boom. This is part of our lectures. I've got, I believe it's a 200 and something slide deck for the coach development program that is available online for anybody who wants to make that transition from coach or from athlete into coach. This is an awesome opportunity for you to do something like that. But we are talking about some of the things that are going on inside here. This last week, we actually talked about the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum and what metrics matter when it comes to recording things. What are we looking for? How do we want to be, tracking stuff? What are we tracking inside the gym? What are we tracking outside of the gym? And what's going to be the best for us? Then we also talk about a bunch of different hierarchies. Love these. CrossFit's got one. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. An active life also has a hierarchy of needs. Today, we are going to spend a majority of our time talking about why injuries happen with the conversation of load versus capacity. What am I loading my body on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, or what's the volume, versus what's my current capacity for those things? So this helps us understand our relationship with our bodies a little bit better, not a little bit, a lot better, and understand, hey, when injuries inevitably do happen, whether it's through accident or through some other reason, we got to have some sort of lens to see how it happened, why it happened, what's going on behind the scenes. Otherwise, we might be distracted by the cause of injury. That happens often, and it's not just inside a CrossFit gym, but we tend to have, when we have a negative experience with anything, we tend to make assumptions about that negative experience. A weird example that I'll give, I remember this, is somebody talked about getting food poisoning from, or getting sick from eating sausage and throwing up, and not like bad time, really negative experience. From that negative experience, they have yet to eat sausage again because they associate, hey, if I eat sausage, I'm going to get sick. I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to, probably be throwing up, and other bad things are going to be happening to me. Where in reality, if we zoomed out, there was probably a lot of different factors that went into them getting sick and throwing up prior to the sausage. Was it the way the sausage was made? Was it the way that it was cooked? Was it having nothing to do with sausage? Was it a virus? So if we step back and take a lens, we can, when things happen to us, we can respond to them and not necessarily react to them. And that's going to be a very, very powerful tool for us as athletes. So let's take a look at this load versus capacity chart here. If you'll notice, if you're watching on YouTube, you got a chart up in front of you. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, any other platform, just listen up a little bit. So we've got load on a vertical axis on what we want to do throughout the day, or horizontal axis isn't really necessary, other than for comparative reasons. We can stack things next to each other. But the reality is we all have limits on what we can do. So we have a capacity limit on that vertical axis. That capacity limit is what our body can safely handle on a day-to-day basis. That capacity can be exceeded, and nothing has to happen, right? We can exceed our capacity and nothing goes wrong. And maybe I'll give a similar analogy to this. I think that this capacity limit, is similar to your maybe check engine light or gas light on your car. When your gas light comes on, hey, I could run out of gas, right? Something could go wrong. Same thing if a check engine light goes on. If you're driving and a check engine light comes on, that doesn't mean that immediately something has happened or immediately something is wrong, but there's probably a high likelihood that something is going to happen. So when you exceed those capacities, there's potential for bad things to happen. Now, what lives below that capacity line? What are things that are included below the capacity line? And the first thing that we'll talk about is anatomical defects and dysfunctions. These are things that haven't changed. They're static, and they potentially can never change. This is like, maybe it's you've you have one leg that's longer than the other, or you have longer femurs in relation to your lower leg, or you had surgery on an ankle or a wrist, and now you have permanently impaired wrist flexion or extension, or ankle flexion and extension. So these are things that are probably not changing, but are taking up space in your capacity limit, right? If I don't have a full range of motion in my wrist because of a surgery and I've got plates in my wrist, it's taking up space and your ability to do things because of that. The next thing that we're going to look at is probably your biggest opportunity to make changes, and that's going to be your SDS, or sleep, your diet, and your stress. The box that sleep, diet, and stress live in is the one that probably varies the most how much vertical space that takes up on a day-to-day basis. After sleep, diet, and stress, we talk about a functional diagnosis. This is, okay, what is your squat range of motion? What is your ankle range of motion? What is your overhead range of motion? What is your metabolic condition? This is a functional diagnosis to see, hey, how much harder are you working on any given day because you don't have optimal fitness, optimal range of motion, optimal metrics when it comes to a functional diagnosis. This one can change throughout time. We can increase mobility. We can increase metabolic conditioning. So that box can change. Then you got some other things that vary from person to person to person to person. You have some things like I've written down in here, morning chores, whatever you got to do in your morning routine, whether that's feeding your kids, whether that's making meals, whether that's, packing things, picking up things. It takes some sort of your capacity throughout your day to do. Then you have work as one of those boxes. Maybe you have an extremely strenuous job. Somebody that works at FedEx or a construction worker where you're probably doing physical labor throughout most of your day, or in the complete opposite realm of maybe you're sitting behind a desk for 6-8 hours a day. That's also going to have an effect on your capacity as well. Then we finish work. Now let's try to hit a workout. Now, these are things that we're now trying to split in after all of the things that have already happened. So these are wants. Up until this point, they've kind of been what has to happen on a regular basis. We've got to have the capacity to do it on a regular basis. We typically call these like activities of daily living. Like if you go to a physical therapist because of an injury, they want to get your capacity back to activities of daily living. They want you to be able to live normally, and want you to be able to go to work, want you to be able to make meals, and want you to be able to walk on a regular basis. If you can do those things, they're like, my job's done. You've done what you needed to, so your capacity is back to activities of daily living. Most of us would like to do things beyond our daily living activities. So these are wants for us. And let's say you go into the gym, you're at the gym on a regular basis. Let's go say you go into the gym and you've got something like lunges in your workout, you've got pull-ups in your workout, and you have snatches in your workout. And those each take up more of your capacity. And let's say if my sleep, diet, and stress box is really large, my lunges are totally fine. I've got no issue doing lunges. I don't feel anything kind of weird. I start doing my pull-ups, and I've now exceeded my capacity a little bit, but I'm doing my pull-ups, and I'm like, my shoulder feels kind of funky. It feels kind of off, but maybe it's just because I need to do some more reps, and it'll feel better if I do some more reps. And then you go into your snatches, and let's say you're on rep 28 of 30, and you get that bar overhead, and you kind of feel like, ooh, oh man, it's something kind of like tweaked or felt weird or strange or something. You finish your day, it still kind of hurts, kind of feels funky, and you're like, man, what's going on? Maybe you go home, you roll it out, you ice it. The next day you come back as well, or you wake up the next morning and you're like, man, my shoulder's still bothering me. I feel like the snatches that I did yesterday, I think that hurt me. I think snatches hurt my shoulder. Now that's a important thing to kind of look at and understand. But if we zoom out and we look at, hey, what else was happening throughout that day that was contributing to me hitting my capacity limit so that bad things could happen? Because remember, if we live below that capacity line, it's almost impossible for bad things to happen or injuries to happen. Now, of course, that bars like extreme accidents or examples, right? Like a car accident might be that's outside of your fault. There's nothing you can do about that. But we're talking about things that are inside our capacity limit on things that we choose to do. So it wasn't necessarily the snatches, but oftentimes now we make that association with snatches and getting hurt. One of the most common associations that we make with injuries is deadlifting and back injuries. I hurt my back deadlifting. So now I don't deadlift because I hurt my back deadlifting, or deadlifting hurts my back. When we don't take a look at all the other things that are going on throughout the day and week that we could be lifting within our capacities. Hey, if we can do all of these things to stay within our capacity limit, injury likelihood drops dramatically, which is something that we absolutely want. Now, we can approach this two different ways. Way number one of approaching this is staying underneath our capacity line. Like, I'm not going to move my capacity line, but what can I do to reduce those other boxes so that when I do things, I don't ever exceed my capacity? And we talked about it earlier. Your functional diagnosis is probably never going to change. Not your functional diagnosis, your anatomical defects is probably not going to change. Your functional diagnosis will change. The more consistent you are in the gym and working on weak points in your capacity, meaning you improve your metabolic conditioning and you improve your range of motion and strength at end ranges of motion, your functional diagnosis will improve, which means you'll be able to do more things without fear of injury. The next thing that you can reduce significantly is your sleep, your diet, and your stress. That box can be shrunk considerably and take up very little of your daily capacity when we sleep 8+ hours on any given night, when we eat whole foods, mostly plants, on a regular basis, and we have keep our stress levels to a minimum. If we are in a chronically stressed condition, there are lots of things that go wrong, but that box for what I'm able to do in a chronically stressed condition is very large. So I want to be able to reduce the amount of space that lack of sleep, poor nutrition, and high stress environments presents for myself. Now, these are all things that are outside of the gym, so that are not the hour that are happening inside the gym. They're the other times that you are not in the gym. Now, your morning routine and your work, those might not change. They might not change that much on a day-to-day basis. So those might be sticking around with you. Now, let's go back to that same thing. If we've reduced the sleep, diet, and stress, we've reduced our functional diagnosis, and the lunges, the pull-ups, and the snatches all stay the same as far as capacity goes. If you're looking at this chart on YouTube, you're seeing, hey, I'm still below my capacity limit. I'm not feeling tweaks in my shoulder for pull-ups, and I'm not feeling tweaks in my shoulder for snatches. I'm well below my capacity limit, and I'm in the green. I feel great. That's one way we can do it. But there's a second way that we can do this, and we want to do these in conjunction with each other, is we can actually raise our limit, right? We can improve our capacities. And we improve our capacity by over time being consistent in our metabolic conditioning, on our strength training, and our range of motion. If we are consistent in that, we improve that capacity limit. Our body's ability to take load increases. And we want that. Not only do we want to reduce the amount that our activities of daily living are taking up in our capacity, but I want to have as much excess capacity as I possibly can. Excess capacity means I get to say yes to all the things that I want to say yes to. I talk about that curve. Because that came up really quick, I'm going to talk about that curve really quickly. This was in another piece right here. Boom. This is our work capacity and energy systems curve. I call these our say yes curve. For coaches, we have very scientific background and information that is portrayed on these. For athletes, this information, all that it means is, hey, if I can increase my ability to do work in each of these sections, I can increase my ability to say yes in these things. So we want to increase our capacities for things. And that's that top ending limit. Cool. That was a lot of information. The big gist of this is we want to stop putting in the negative association with potentially a single movement with an injury. A single movement with an injury. Our bodies are meant to move. There is no one thing that is making our bodies get injured. We have to take a look at all and understand what are all the other factors that are contributing to my capacity limit. How can I reduce those factors so that I have as much excess capacity as I possibly can? And then what can I do under my own volition, under my own power to increase my capacity limit? What are the ways that I can create as much excess capacity for myself as I possibly can so that I'm never getting close to making injuries happen? Some of the ways that we do that kind of stuff is very evident here at Oxnard Movement. Working with a nutrition coach, talking about lifestyle changes, having a ton of resources available for nutrition, for movement, for mobility, and then also having coaches that are excellent at creating some functional diagnosis for you, knowing what you're lacking in, and excellent coaching so that when we are doing our lunges, our pull-ups, and our snatches, corrections are being made. You're not doing things incorrect, even outside of your functional diagnosis as well. We would love to have you share this with a friend, maybe who's suffered from a back injury, suffered from a shoulder injury, from some sort of activity, right? This association can be true for even runners, right? I injured maybe a stress fracture on my foot from running. Therefore, running's bad. I'm going to stop running. No, I don't think that is the right move. Share this with somebody who maybe has had that sort of experience, or if you know somebody who's had that experience, put them in the comments. I would love to be able to share this podcast episode with them so that they can better understand, like, hey, what can I be doing so that I don't make those negative associations with a single thing and an injury. I'm not going to do this because of this. I'm not going to do this because of this. Other than that, we want to stay moving throughout our life. That's the point of this entire podcast. Hey, what are some things that we can talk about so that we can stay moving throughout our life? Injuries are a big part of that. How do I stay moving, or how do I navigate injuries? We want to make sure that you could have a positive or even a neutral experience when it comes to injuries. Because if you move at all, you are susceptible to injuries. How do I approach those injuries? How do I recover from those injuries? And how do I come back and train again or move again post injury? This is the first conversation in understanding that. There you go. Please rate us, subscribe. We love putting out these episodes for you guys. If this is on YouTube, let me know. Put it in the comments. What have you been doing in the last couple of weeks for movement? If you are somebody who has had an experience like this, let's hear about it. I want to know about your negative experience in the comments down below. And we will see you all next week. Happy Thursday. Next week will be August. Crazy. The 8th month of 2024. Here we go.